Mr. Gadberry, we both know how the county works. I see your permit issues.
Sheriff, what exactly are you proposing here?
I'm proposing your problems vanish for a small fee. Don't waste my time. This needs to look organic, right now.
This should cover the fine, Sheriff, all of them. Consider the issue resolved.
Good, we never had this conversation.
This wasn't just another case of a dirty cop getting caught. This was a coordinated takedown that exposed a network of extortion stretching back years. Ruddy walked into that office thinking he controlled the situation. He walked out in handcuffs, facing charges that would strip him of everything he'd ever built on the backs of innocent people. Here's something incredible. We're so grateful you clicked on this video. Your support means everything to us. Before we walk you through exactly how this operation went down, we'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Are you watching from New York? Toronto? London? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Trust us, you won't want to miss how this story ends. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Sheriff Ruddy had been wearing the badge for 17 years. He started in a small county department, worked his way up through the ranks, and built a reputation as someone who knew how to get things done. But somewhere along the way, the line between enforcing the law and bending it for profit disappeared completely. For the past 5 years, Ruddy had been running a quiet operation. Small business owners in his jurisdiction knew the routine. Open a new shop, and within weeks, Ruddy or one of his deputies would show up. There were always problems. Permits that somehow got delayed. Safety inspections that never seemed to pass. Fire code violations that appeared out of nowhere. And every single time there was a solution. Cash made problems vanish. Most people paid. They had no choice. Fighting meant months of red tape, legal fees they couldn't afford, and businesses that stayed closed while they burned through savings. A few $1,000s to make it all go away seemed like the smarter option. Ruddy counted on that calculation. He'd made over $200,000 this way, and not once had anyone reported him. Mr. Gadberry opened his automotive repair shop in March. He'd saved for years to make it happen. The building was perfect, good location, solid structure, room to grow. He hired 3 employees, invested in quality equipment, and prepared for his grand opening. That's when Ruddy showed up for the first time. The sheriff walked through the shop slowly, clipboard in hand, shaking his head at things that weren't actually problems. The ventilation system needed upgrades, he said. The electrical wiring wasn't up to code. The parking lot striping was too faded. Gadberry listened carefully, took notes, and promised to address everything. But when he called the county inspector to schedule a follow-up, he was told there were no violations on record. That's when Gadberry understood what was really happening. He'd heard whispers about Ruddy from other business owners in town, but he never imagined it would happen to him. Now he faced a choice. Pay the bribe and let corruption continue, or take a risk that could cost him everything he'd worked for. What Gadberry did next would change both their lives forever. But the wheels he set in motion moved slowly at first, and Ruddy had no idea the trap was already being built around him. Gadberry didn't go to the local police. He knew better than that. Ruddy had connections throughout the department, friends who'd cover for him, and a network that protected its own. Instead, Gadberry drove 2 hours to the nearest FBI field office and walked in with a folder full of documentation. He had records of every interaction with Ruddy, dates, times, and detailed notes about what was said. He talked to 7 other business owners who'd paid Ruddy off over the years. They were scared to come forward, but they'd given Gadberry their stories in writing. He presented everything to Special Agent Victoria Chen, who'd been investigating public corruption cases for over a decade. Chen reviewed the materials for 3 days. She cross-referenced Ruddy's financial records, looking for unexplained deposits and spending patterns that didn't match his salary. What she found confirmed everything. Ruddy had been making cash deposits just under the reporting threshold for years. He'd bought a boat, a vacation property, and a truck all paid in cash. His wife's business account showed similar patterns. The FBI decided to move forward with a sting operation. But they needed undeniable evidence. Testimony could be challenged. Documents could be disputed. What they needed was Ruddy on camera, in his own words, committing a federal crime. And Gadberry was willing to help make that happen. Chen brought in 2 more agents and a technical specialist. They spent a week planning every detail. Gadberry's office would be wired with multiple cameras, one hidden in the bookshelf, another in the smoke detector, and a backup in the desk lamp. Audio equipment would capture every word from 3 different sources. The feeds would stream live to a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, where agents would monitor everything in real time. Gadberry was nervous but determined. Chen trained him on how to act natural, how to let Ruddy do the talking, and, most importantly, how to signal when the evidence was solid enough to move in. A simple gesture placing an envelope on the desk would tell the agents that Ruddy had made his demands clear and accepted payment. They set the meeting for a Thursday afternoon. Gadberry called Ruddy and told him he was ready to discuss solutions to his permit problems. Ruddy's voice on the phone was casual, almost friendly. He said he'd stop by around 3 o'clock. He'd done this so many times before that he didn't see any reason to be cautious. The morning of the operation, Chen ran through the plan one final time with Gadberry. Stay calm. Let him talk. Get him to state his demands explicitly, then give the signal. Federal agents would be positioned at every exit. The moment that envelope touched the desk, they'd move in. Ruddy had no idea he was walking into the most recorded crime scene of his career. Thursday arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the low 70s. Gadberry opened his shop at 8 in the morning like it was any other day. He greeted his employees, reviewed the work orders, and tried to keep his mind focused on routine tasks. But his hands were shaking every time he checked his watch. The FBI team arrived at noon. They parked the surveillance van in a grocery store lot with a clear view of the shop. Inside the van, 3 agents set up monitors and tested every camera feed. Agent Chen sat in the passenger seat wearing a headset, watching Gadberry move through his office on multiple screens. The audio came through crystal clear. By 2:30, everything was in position. 2 agents dressed as utility workers stood near the side entrance. Another pair sat in an unmarked sedan at the front of the building. Chen had a tactical team on standby 3 minutes away in case Ruddy brought backup. Every possible scenario had been planned for. Gadberry sat at his desk, pretending to review invoices. The envelope containing marked bills sat in his top drawer. $2,500 in cash? The amount Ruddy had suggested during their last conversation. The FBI had photographed every serial number. If Ruddy took that money and walked out, they'd have him on federal extortion charges with evidence that couldn't be disputed. At 2:58, a dark blue pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. Ruddy stepped out wearing jeans, a polo shirt, and a baseball cap. No uniform, no badge visible. He'd learned over the years that showing up in official capacity created paper trails. These visits were always off the books, always casual, always deniable if anyone asked questions later. He walked through the front entrance and nodded to one of Gadberry's employees who pointed toward the office in the back. Ruddy knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for an answer. He had that kind of confidence, the certainty of a man who'd done this dozens of times without consequence. Gadberry stood up and shook his hand. Ruddy sat down in the chair across from the desk, leaned back and smiled. He asked how business was going. Gadberry said it would be better once the permit issues were resolved. Ruddy nodded slowly and said that's exactly why he was there. The cameras captured everything. The angle of Ruddy's face, the relaxed posture, the way he crossed his arms and started talking about solutions like he was doing Gadberry a favor. In the surveillance van, Agent Chen leaned closer to the monitor. This was it. Years of corruption were about to be documented in real time. Ruddy had walked into dozens of offices just like this one, but he'd never walked into a federal trap before. And he had no idea how close he was to losing everything. Ruddy didn't waste time with small talk. He told Gadberry that the permit problems weren't going away on their own. The county had strict regulations, he said, and inspectors were looking at everything with extra scrutiny these days. Gadberry asked what it would take to resolve the issues. Ruddy leaned forward and said it depended on how serious Gadberry was about staying in business. He laid it out plainly. $2,500 would make the inspection report disappear. The permits would be approved within a week. No follow-up visits. No more delays. Gadberry would be free to operate without anyone breathing down his neck. Ruddy said he'd handled situations like this before, and everyone walked away happy. It was just the cost of doing business in this county. Gadberry asked if there was another option. Ruddy's expression hardened. He said the other option was watching his shop stay closed for months, while the county found new violations every week. He could hire lawyers and fight it through the system if he wanted, but that would cost him tens of thousands of dollars and probably end with the same result. Or he could be smart, handle it today, and move on with his life. In the surveillance van, Agent Chen signaled to the tactical team to be ready. Ruddy had just committed extortion on camera. Every word was recorded, every threat was documented. But they needed one more piece. They needed Ruddy to physically accept the payment. That would seal the case beyond any possibility of defense. Gadberry opened his desk drawer and pulled out the envelope. He placed it on the desk between them, but didn't slide it forward yet. He asked Ruddy if this was really the only way. Ruddy picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it, and looked inside. He counted the bills quickly, nodded, and tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket. He told Gadberry he'd made the right choice. Within a week, all the paperwork would be processed, and the shop could operate without any interference. Ruddy stood up and extended his hand. Gadberry shook it, and Ruddy turned toward the door. He had the money. The meeting was over. In his mind, this was just another successful collection. But Gadberry hadn't given the signal yet. The envelope with the marked bills was supposed to stay on the desk. That was the plan. Ruddy taking it and preparing to leave created a problem. If he walked out of the building with that money, the agents would have to arrest him in the parking lot, and defense attorneys could argue he was planning to return it or report it. They needed him caught in the act, inside the office with clear intent. Gadberry made a split-second decision. He asked Ruddy to wait a moment. He said he wanted confirmation in writing that the permits would be approved. Ruddy turned back, irritated. He said that's not how this worked. There were no receipts, no paper trails. That was the whole point. Gadberry insisted. He said he needed something to protect himself in case the permits didn't come through. Ruddy's face tightened. He pulled the envelope back out of his jacket and tossed it onto the desk. He told Gadberry he could either trust him or deal with the consequences of not trusting him. The choice was his. That's when Gadberry placed his hand on the envelope. The signal. Agent Chen saw it on the monitor and spoke into her radio. The tactical team moved immediately. Ruddy didn't hear the footsteps at first. He was still talking, still trying to intimidate Gadberry into backing down. He said trust was the foundation of these arrangements, and if Gadberry couldn't understand that, maybe he wasn't cut out for business in this county. His hand reached for the envelope again. Yes. That's when the door burst open. 3 FBI agents in tactical gear entered with weapons drawn. They shouted for Ruddy to put his hands up and step away from the desk. For a moment, he froze completely. His brain couldn't process what was happening. He looked at Gadberry, then at the agents, then back at the envelope on the desk. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Agent Chen entered behind the tactical team. She identified herself as FBI and told Ruddy he was under arrest for extortion under color of official authority. One of the agents moved forward and secured Ruddy's hands behind his back with zip ties. Another agent picked up the envelope and placed it into an evidence bag. Chen read Ruddy his rights while he stood there, face drained of color, finally understanding the trap he'd walked into. Ruddy found his voice and started denying everything. He said this was a misunderstanding. He was just having a conversation with a local business owner. The money wasn't a bribe. It was a legitimate consultation fee for advisory services. He demanded to speak with his attorney. Chen told him he'd have that opportunity at the field office. Right now, he needed to cooperate and come with them quietly. 2 more agents entered the office and began documenting the scene. They photographed the desk, the chair where Ruddy had been sitting, and the exact position of everything in the room. The technical specialist arrived and started dismantling the hidden cameras, preserving every piece of equipment as evidence. The entire operation had gone exactly according to plan. Outside, Gadberry's employees watched through the windows as Ruddy was escorted to an unmarked vehicle. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People came out of nearby shops to see what was happening. Some of them were business owners who'd paid Ruddy off in the past. They watched in silence as the sheriff who'd extorted them for years was driven away in federal custody. Gadberry sat down at his desk after the agents cleared out. His hands were still shaking. Agent Chen stayed behind to debrief him and thank him for his courage. She told him that without his willingness to cooperate, Ruddy would still be out there victimizing people. The case they'd built was airtight. The recordings were clear. The marked bills were in evidence. Ruddy's own words had convicted him. But the story didn't end with the arrest. What came next would reveal just how deep the corruption ran and how many lives Ruddy had destroyed in his pursuit of illegal money. The investigation was just beginning, and Ruddy's world was about to unravel completely. The FBI processed Ruddy at their field office, while Agent Chen and her team began executing search warrants. They hit his home, his storage unit, and his wife's business office simultaneously. What they found exceeded even their expectations. Ruddy had kept detailed records, a ledger hidden in his garage that documented every shakedown for the past 4 years. Names, dates, amounts collected, and notes about which businesses were easier targets. The ledger listed 43 separate victims: restaurants, dry cleaners, barbershops, and small retail stores. Most of the owners were immigrants or people of color, individuals Ruddy believed were less likely to report him or fight back. He'd collected over $300,000 in bribes during that time frame. The marked bills from Gadberry's envelope were found in a safe along with nearly $60,000 in cash from other recent collections. Federal prosecutors moved quickly. They charged Ruddy with 19 counts of extortion, 4 counts of bribery, and multiple counts of tax evasion for failing to report the illegal income. His attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was too strong. The recordings showed clear intent. The ledger proved a pattern of criminal behavior. The marked bills tied him directly to the FBI sting operation. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors played the entire surveillance video in court. Jurors watched Ruddy demand money, threaten Gadberry's business, and pocket the cash without hesitation. They heard his voice explaining how the system worked and how easy it was to make problems disappear for the right price. Defense attorneys argued entrapment, but the FBI had documented Ruddy's history of extortion long before Gadberry became involved. 12 business owners testified about their experiences with Ruddy. They described the same pattern: unexpected violations, impossible demands, and the suggestion that cash payments would resolve everything. Some had paid multiple times over the years. One restaurant owner broke down on the stand, explaining how Ruddy's shakedowns had nearly bankrupted his family. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Ruddy to 20 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. He was ordered to pay full restitution to his victims, return all illegally obtained funds, and forfeit his pension. His wife filed for divorce 2 months after the sentencing. His 2 adult children changed their last names and moved to different states. The career he'd built, the reputation he'd maintained, and the life he'd funded through corruption, all of it was gone. But the consequences extended beyond Ruddy himself. The county launched an internal investigation that led to the resignation of 3 other deputies who'd been aware of his activities but never reported them. The state attorney general's office opened corruption probes into 4 neighboring counties where similar patterns had been reported. Ruddy's arrest triggered a wave of accountability that swept through the entire region. Gadberry's shop finally opened for business in August. The permits were approved without issue once Ruddy was removed from the equation. Community members showed up on opening day to support him. Local news outlets ran stories about his bravery and the FBI operation that brought down a corrupt sheriff. He became a symbol of resistance against systemic abuse of power. The marked bills that sealed Ruddy's fate were displayed in a frame at the FBI field office as a reminder that evidence, patience, and courage could dismantle even the most entrenched corruption. 2 years after Ruddy's conviction, the full scope of his corruption became even clearer. Civil attorneys representing his victims filed a class action lawsuit against the county for failing to supervise him and allowing the extortion scheme to continue unchecked. The county settled for $3.5 million, distributed among the 43 documented victims. Gadberry received $120,000, enough to expand his business and hire 2 additional employees. The settlement came with requirements for systemic reform. The county implemented new oversight procedures for all law enforcement interactions with local businesses. Body cameras became mandatory for any official visits. An independent review board was established to investigate complaints against deputies and sheriffs. Anonymous reporting systems were created so victims of corruption could come forward without fear of retaliation. Ruddy's ledger became a teaching tool at the FBI Academy. New agents studied the case as an example of how public corruption investigations should be conducted. The combination of victim cooperation, undercover operations, and meticulous evidence collection created a blueprint for similar cases nationwide. Agent Chen received a commendation for her work and was promoted to lead the Bureau's Public Integrity Unit. For the business owners who'd suffered under Ruddy's schemes, the outcome brought mixed emotions. The money helped, but it couldn't return the years of stress, the sleepless nights worrying about losing everything, or the feeling of helplessness when facing corrupt authority. Some closed their businesses anyway, unable to recover from the financial damage Ruddy had caused. Others stayed and rebuilt, determined not to let his crimes define their futures. Gadberry continued operating his shop successfully. He hired several employees who'd worked for businesses that Ruddy had shut down. He spoke at community meetings about the importance of reporting corruption and trusting the systems designed to combat it. He acknowledged that coming forward was terrifying, but silence only allowed predators like Ruddy to continue destroying lives. Ruddy spent his first 2 years in prison appealing his conviction. Every appeal was denied. His attorneys argued that the sentence was excessive, that his cooperation warranted leniency, that his family was suffering unfairly. But federal judges consistently ruled that his abuse of public trust, his targeting of vulnerable victims, and his years of criminal activity justified every aspect of his punishment. In interviews from prison, Ruddy claimed he was a scapegoat for a broken system. He said everyone in law enforcement knew how things worked. and he was just unlucky enough to get caught. He showed no genuine remorse for his victims. Even facing 20 years behind bars, he couldn't accept responsibility for the harm he'd caused. That lack of accountability only reinforced why his sentence was necessary. The story of Sheriff Ruddy and Mr. Gadberry became a reminder that corruption thrives in silence. It grows when good people feel powerless to challenge it. But one person's courage to stand up, to document the truth, and to trust the right authorities can bring down systems that seemed untouchable. Ruddy wore a badge for 17 years. He believed it made him immune to consequences. He was wrong. Do you think justice was truly served in this case? Could the system have caught Ruddy sooner if more victims had come forward? What would you have done in Gadberry's position, paid the bribe and stayed silent, or taken the risk to expose the corruption? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real stories about justice, courage, and accountability. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Thanks for being here.